back to That Dad Guy. It's September the 3rd, 2022, and it's time for That Dad Guy Answers. So you've given me some questions over the last 2 weeks because I was away on vacation. I didn't put out a episode last Saturday for this, so these should be the accumulation of 2 weeks worth of questions for our part 30 today that we have. So I'm going to get to that right away. First one I have comes from Snail Mail with Smokey in Wisconsin, and he says, what made you choose your career, and what's the best and worst part of your job? Well, I was a financial advisor prior to being a employee of Canada Post, and I was looking for a change and found this job. It came up. There was a rural suburban mail carrier position available, and I thought, I'd like to try that. So went through the interview process and did the tests, and luckily got in, and here we are 10 years later, still doing it. So what's the best part? The best part of it, I think, is that it's really not a lot of supervision with it. I get my stuff, I go out on the route, and I deliver the mail, and I get it done in a timely fashion. So the hours are great, love that. The worst part of the job probably is when I've got to deliver in a rainstorm or a snowstorm or something like that. The weather certainly is a downside to delivering the mail, other than when you have beautiful sunny days. So thank you, Smokey, for those questions. All right, what's the next one we have? All right, this one comes from Petra in the UK, and she says, do you celebrate Halloween when you were a child? And in the country where she grew up, Halloween was only celebrated by the US soldiers and families stationed on the local bases nearby, the military bases. We didn't do trick-or-treating or had any crazy teenage Halloween parties. Halloween is still not as big as it is in the United States, but is getting more and more commercialized here in the UK. So yes, as a child we did celebrate Halloween, and we still celebrate Halloween now. So we did dress up in costumes as kids, and they still do now. It's a big event here. We as adults now, for our house, we decorate outside. I think I've got some videos on here. If not, they're certainly on Instagram of how we decorate the house. And I probably will do one up this year for YouTube if I haven't in the past, so you can see. We have a good time with it. We put on some spooky music. We don't really get dressed up too much inside the house, but certainly our entryway around the front door is all decorated, and the walkway up to, and the trees and things around. So we try to make it kind of spooky and creepy, and the kids seem to enjoy it. So yeah, it's a big thing here. So thank you for that, Petra. Let's move on to the next question. All right, this one comes from Basil in India, and he says, you were away for a while. What was the most rewarding experience from your trip? And then, well, let's start with that one, and then we'll go to the second one. What's the most rewarding experience of my trip was getting my daughter settled at university. It's a big change in all of our lives, but certainly in hers, to go into this next stage of life where she has to be on her own and use her skills and knowledge that she's been given and acquired over the first 18 years of her life to live on her own and make good decisions. So that's been the most rewarding thing, is that hopefully we as parents have done a good job and put her on the right foot to start on her life. So the second question is, how much do you miss having your daughter at home? Well, that's obvious. I mean, as a parent, we're certainly going to miss having her around. Having her bedroom not occupied is hard, but knowing that she's out starting the next life is rewarding for her. It's going to be hard as parents to be far away from her and not be there for any pitfall that she might have along the way, to be there to catch her and to do all the things that the parents do. So yeah, it's hard for all of us. All right, thanks, Basil. All right, the next one comes from Samantha in the United States. She says, as a stamp collector, what are your thoughts of making art or collages out of stamps versus just keeping them in an album? All right, so that's the first question. There's another one after that. So my thoughts are, stamps are aplenty. You put out millions and millions of stamps. So if you're creative enough to use some of those stamps and create something new in another project, go for it. I'm not offended to see stamps, especially common stamps, being reused and put into art form. Me personally, I think it would be hard for me to take scissors to a stamp and then cut them up and turn them into a different shape. But that's just me. If I receive it as a card and someone's put the effort into doing it, that's great. I have no problem with it. Next part of that question says, when you receive letters or cards in an envelope, do you keep the letter or cards with the envelope as is, or do you remove the stamps from the envelope for your collection? So that one is, if I get a card that comes in an envelope and there's a stamp on it, then the envelope, I tear the corner off and I keep the stamp. If it has a special postmark, I might keep the whole piece of paper. Otherwise, I'm going to soak off the paper and just keep the stamp to put in the collection. If I get a stamp on a postcard, for example, let's give you an example here. Here's a postcard. There's one that hasn't been canceled. I'm not taking it off the postcard. It belongs on this postcard. As postcard collectors, I'm going to keep it on that. I'm not going to tear the corner of the postcard off to keep a stamp in my collection. So, yeah, if it comes on a regular envelope, I'm going to take it off. If it comes on a postcard, it stays with the postcard. Okay? And then I think that's it for that one. All right, so thank you, Sam, for that question. Okay, let's see. Some of these are ones that are just saying thank you for answering the other ones. Okay, this next one comes from Maria in Greece, and she says she once received a card from the United States with a sticker saying missent to Japan. Another time a parcel of hers went from Italy and it was was missent to Canada. It was then returned to sender and she had to resend it. So in my area of expertise, so she's saying because I work for Canada Post or as a mail carrier, was wondering how a card or parcel ended up being missent or sent to the wrong continent. Well, multiple things can happen. One, the person that's sending the parcel sometimes puts the wrong address on it. That does happen. Or it puts an incomplete address. I've had envelopes that come that say, please deliver to the third greenhouse after the big red church. And that's the address. It might say Sackville, New Brunswick, or something like that in the postal code, but it doesn't have a real address on it. Now, some mail carriers, if they've been there for years and years and years, and small communities, they'll know exactly where that letter's destined to go, and it still will find its destination. If someone else was maybe filling in or on just a temporary person in that area or new to the route and got that address and couldn't find a proper place, they're just going to mark return to sender. So a lot of times there are addresses that are incomplete. Sometimes they might put the street address as Main Street, but not put the number to go with it. And if the postal code doesn't match properly, they can't find it. Or maybe a postal code, because sometimes postal codes are the same for a whole street or a whole block of a street. So they can't narrow it down to the exact address. Those ones get to go back to where they came from. What other things have happened? At Christmas time, people like to put cards and things in envelopes. If you put it in a red envelope, it's less likely to reach its destination. The reason why the machines that it goes through has a hard time determining the red envelope and the maybe black ink or blue ink that people write their address on. Sometimes it's hard for the machine to read it. So sometimes red envelopes, and you think at Christmas time, a lot of them are red envelopes, they can end up going to the wrong place or get returned to sender because the machine can't read them properly. Or get delayed because they have to go through some sort of a manual sort for people to go through and then try to put them in the right destinations. The other thing that can happen is that places have the same name. So here in Atlantic Canada, we have Sydney, Nova Scotia, and then you guys probably all know Sydney, Australia. Well, a lot of mail gets mixed up between places that have the same names, especially if they're not finished. If someone didn't put the Australia, just put Sydney and put a postal code or zip code in there, then sometimes those letters get missent to the wrong place. So if you were trying to get your letter to Sydney, Nova Scotia, sometimes it'll end up going to Sydney, Australia, because the people that look at it say, Sydney, I know where that goes, and it goes this way. They don't finish reading the address of them. So there is human error and there is mechanical error that can happen along the way. And sometimes it's just a mistake. cards get stuck together. You put a thing like this and it's a wet day and another card goes in and they get stuck together. They both end up going to the address on the outside and not to the one that if they peel them away, you would find that there was another one inside that they could look at. That happens too. And so both cards or letters end up going to one destination when they could have been separated and go to another one. So lots of different ways that mail can get missent or get returned to sender. So hopefully that answers that for you, Maria. And I think that might be it. That looks like all the questions we have over the 2-week period. So thank you so much. Keep for next week. We're going to have part 31, hopefully. So leave me more questions, and I will do my best to try to get you some answers for them and keep this thing going. So thanks so much. Thanks for being patient where I was away last week and I didn't have one. So give me an extra week to answer your questions. So for you guys, have a magical week. What, Polo? You say like, subscribe, share, and tell all your friends?
Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy?